Please buy us, human. The fallen alien warrior whispered to me Caleb Drayton had been a trader for years, traveling from station to station, making deals with aliens from all corners of the galaxy. His ship, the Resolute, was small but reliable, always buzzing with the hum of engines as it carried him through the vast emptiness of space. Caleb didn't mind the solitude. In fact, he preferred it. He knew how to strike a deal, how to make his credits, and how to avoid the more dangerous parts of the galaxy. But today was different. Today, something would change. The station Aurora Gate was a bustling hub of activity. Alien merchants sold their wares, traders bargained in low voices, and ships of all sizes moved in and out, carrying cargo from one world to another. Caleb walked through the crowded marketplace, his eyes scanning the various stalls. His mind was on business, what supplies he needed for the next leg of his journey. But then, his attention was caught by something he hadn't expected. A line of alien prisoners, their hands bound with chains, being led to a nearby auction stage. He had seen slaves before. Traders sometimes sold beings from conquered planets or those unlucky enough to be caught by bounty hunters. But there was something different about this group. As Caleb's eyes swept over them, one of them stood out, an alien woman. She was tall and lean, her once-proud armor now battered and torn. Her dark green skin seemed to shimmer under the harsh lights of the station, and her eyes, though tired, held a fire that Caleb couldn't ignore. Her name, he later learned, was Zaria, a warrior from the fallen Kantari Dominion. Her people had once ruled vast swaths of the galaxy, feared by all. But now their empire had crumbled, and the warriors who once fought in glory were nothing more than prisoners, sold off to the highest bidder. Zaria didn't look at Caleb at first. She kept her head low, her expression guarded. But Caleb felt an odd pull in his chest, a curiosity he couldn't explain. He didn't know why, but he wanted to help her. His gut told him there was more to this story, more than just a simple auction of war prisoners. The auctioneer, an alien with sharp features and an oily smile, started the bidding. "We have here the last of the Kantari, once generals, once conquerors of planets. These warriors have fallen, their empire lost. Who will give them a new home, a new master?" Caleb stood back, watching the crowd. The slavers, the buyers, they all looked eager, their eyes gleaming with the thought of owning such powerful beings. But Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had done business with slavers before, but this was different. These weren't just slaves, they were people. They had fought for their people's survival. They had honor even if the universe had turned its back on them. Then, as if sensing his gaze, Zaria looked up. Her eyes met his, and for a moment time seemed to slow. In that brief moment, something passed between them, a connection, though neither of them understood it fully. Zaria's voice, low and rough from days of shouting, broke the silence. "Please, buy us, human," she whispered. It was a quiet plea, but there was power in her words, something desperate, something that reached into Caleb's chest and twisted. She didn't beg. No, Zaria was not the type to beg, but there was a plea there, hidden beneath the surface of her pride. The words hit Caleb hard. It wasn't the way she said it, it was the weight behind them. She wasn't just asking for freedom. She was asking for something else. Caleb didn't know what it was, but he felt it. He glanced around, noticing that the other bidders were growing restless. The auction was about to begin. Caleb didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and placed his bid. The slavers were shocked. Most people didn't bid for prisoners, especially not a whole group of them. But Caleb wasn't just bidding on them to make a profit. There was something else at play here. The auctioneer hesitated, looking Caleb over with suspicion. "You want the Kantari warriors, human? They're not cheap. You'll pay a high price for them." Caleb didn't flinch. He had credits, plenty of them. He could afford it. "I'll take them," he said firmly. "All of them." The auctioneer smirked, clearly calculating the amount. "Very well, you've bought them." A low murmur swept through the crowd as Caleb stood there, his heart racing. The deal had been struck, but it didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. There was something unsettling about the way the slavers handed over the chains, about the way the Kantari warriors, especially Zaria, looked at him. They weren't just grateful. They were watching him, studying him, as if they were trying to figure out who this human was and why he had decided to save them. Zaria was silent as the chains were removed from her wrists. Her gaze was fixed on Caleb, and for a moment he felt like she was searching for something in him. A sign of weakness, a sign of trust, or maybe something deeper. Caleb didn't know, but he had a feeling that this decision, this moment, would change his life forever. The warriors were led away, and Caleb followed them. As they made their way to his ship, the Resolute, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. He had freed them from the slavers, but now he was responsible for them. What did they expect from him? Were they just grateful for their freedom, or was there more to this than met the eye? When they boarded the ship, the warriors took their places in the cargo bay, settling in for the long journey ahead. Caleb watched them for a moment, feeling the eyes of Zaria on him. There was something in her stare, something unreadable. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary rescue. There was something about Zaria, something hidden in her past, something that would soon reveal itself. Caleb didn't know it yet, but the universe was about to change. And he, a simple human trader, was about to become a key player in a story much larger than he could have ever imagined. As the engines of the Resolute roared to life, Caleb set a course for the nearest planet, wondering what the future held. But no matter how much he tried to prepare himself, he couldn't shake the feeling that Zaria's story was only beginning, and that his fate was now intertwined with hers in ways he couldn't understand. The stars outside his ship grew blurry as the ship shot into faster-than-light travel. Caleb didn't know what awaited him in the unknown reaches of space, but one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. The stars outside the Resolute streaked by in a blur as Caleb Drayton sat in the cockpit of his ship, his fingers tapping nervously on the control. Paneled. It had been a few hours since he bought the fallen warriors from the slavers, and the weight of his decision was starting to settle on him. What had he gotten himself into? What did these warriors expect from him now? He glanced over at the comms screen, where Zaria's face was displayed. Her features were unreadable, her dark green skin looking almost gray under the dim lights of the ship. She hadn't spoken much since they left Aurora Gate, but Caleb could feel her watching him. Her gaze was sharp, intense, as if she were waiting for something, waiting for him to make a mistake. Or perhaps she was simply waiting for the inevitable moment when he would turn them all in. He couldn't blame her. Humans didn't normally go around rescuing alien warriors. As the hum of the ship's engines filled the silence, Caleb's thoughts wandered. Why had Zaria asked him, of all people, to buy her? The other warriors, they seemed resigned to their fate, but Zaria had whispered to him like she knew something about him. Something he didn't understand yet. Was she testing him, or did she believe that he could help her and her people somehow? He shook his head, trying to focus on the journey ahead. He had a few stops to make to get supplies for the Resolute, but they were going to have to lay low for a while. The slavers, particularly Verk, wouldn't give up easily, and with the Jaren syndicate involved, Caleb knew that trouble was only a matter of time. Zaria appeared on the comms again, this time without the stoic mask she had worn before. Her expression was tired, but there was something else there, a flicker of hope, buried beneath layers of skepticism. "You have questions," she said, her voice low and steady like it had been worn down by years of battle. "I can see it in your eyes." Caleb hesitated for a moment before responding. "Yeah, I guess I do. I don't really understand. Why me? Why ask me to buy you?" "I'm just a trader, Zaria." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but there was no anger there. Instead, it was as if she were considering how much to reveal, how much she could trust him. "The Kantari Dominion once ruled this galaxy," she said, her voice distant as if she were speaking about a different lifetime. "We were feared by all. Our warriors were unmatched in battle, but power has a way of corrupting, and now our empire lies in ruins. My people are scattered, lost. What remains of us is broken." Caleb listened carefully, though he didn't speak. He had heard stories of the Kantari, tales of a fierce, once great empire that had been destroyed in a civil war. But those were just stories, rumors passed along by traders and mercenaries. Hearing it from someone who had lived it made it real. Zaria continued. "There is a curse, you see, a mark upon us. We are the last of the true Kantari, but we are not what we once were. There are those who believe that the curse can be broken, that the right person, someone outside our kind, could help us reclaim what was lost." Caleb shifted in his seat, trying to understand. "You think I can break this curse?" Zaria met his gaze through the screen, her expression unreadable. "I do not know, but there is a prophecy, something my people have long forgotten. It speaks of a human, someone who can change the course of history. That is why I asked you to buy us. Not because you are a traitor, but because you might be the one to free us from our fate." Her words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Caleb didn't know what to think. A prophecy? He wasn't sure he believed in that kind of thing. But there was something about Zarya, something in her eyes that made him feel like he couldn't just turn away. There was more at play here than just a simple rescue. "I don't know what I can do," Caleb said quietly. "But I won't turn you in. I'll help you however I can." Zarya's expression softened just a little, though it was fleeting. "You have already helped us more than you know." The comm screen flickered briefly as the ship's AI alerted him to an incoming message. Caleb glanced at the screen, his hand hovering over the console, but he paused when he saw Zarya's face. She was watching him again, studying him as though she were waiting for something. "Do you know where we're headed?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Caleb shrugged. "I have a few stops to make, some supplies. I didn't think it would be wise to stick around Aurora Gate for too long, but we can head anywhere you need." Zarya's eyes flickered with thought. "There is a place, a hidden world where my people once sought refuge long before the war. It may hold the answers you seek." Caleb frowned. "A hidden world? You mean like a secret base or something?" "Not exactly," she said, her voice distant again. "It is a place that holds memories of the Kantari. If we are to break the curse, we must find it. The artifact we need may be there." Caleb thought for a moment. The idea of going after some ancient artifact sounded dangerous. But something about Zarya's tone made it seem like this was more than just a quest for treasure. This was about redemption, about hope. "All right," Caleb said, nodding. "Let's find this place, but we'll need to be careful. We don't know who else might be looking for it." Zarya's gaze softened, and for the first time, Caleb saw something like gratitude in her eyes. "I know, but you are not alone. We will fight together." The next few days aboard the Resolute were spent preparing for the journey ahead. Caleb had always been a practical man, and even with the uncertainty surrounding him, he kept the ship running smoothly. The warriors, those who had been freed, stayed in the cargo bay, resting and keeping to themselves. They were quiet, watchful, as if waiting for the next challenge to come their way. Zarya, however, spent most of her time with Caleb, helping him with the ship's systems and training him in combat. He didn't expect her to teach him how to fight like one of her kind, but she did. She was patient, showing him the ways of the Kantari, how to wield a blade and move with the precision of a warrior. Though Caleb had always relied on his wits and his deals, he found himself growing stronger, faster, and more aware of his surroundings. The more he learned, the more he realized how much he had underestimated Zarya and her people. They weren't just warriors, they were survivors, and that resilience was something Caleb admired. The ship's AI suddenly alerted him to a new message, and as Caleb glanced at the screen, he froze. It was from Verk, the slaver. "We know who you are, human," the message read. "And we will find you. The Kantari belong to us. Give them back and we might let you live. If not, the consequences will be severe." Caleb's blood ran cold. He had known the slavers wouldn't give up easily, but this was a warning. They were already on his trail. He looked over at Zarya, her face hardening as she read the message. "It's only a matter of time," she said, her voice grim. Caleb nodded. "We'll be ready, we have to be." And as the Resolute sped toward the unknown, both Caleb and Zarya knew one thing for certain. Their fight for freedom was only beginning. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations and uncertainty. Caleb's ship, the Resolute, hummed steadily as it traveled through the dark stretches of space. The crew was small, just him, Zarya, and the other warriors, but the weight of their mission felt heavy. They were heading into unknown territory, a hidden world where the remnants of the Kantari people had once sought refuge. It was a place lost to time, forgotten by most, but Zarya believed it held the key to breaking the curse on her people. But there was something Caleb couldn't shake. The message from Verk, the slaver, still echoed in his mind. They knew who he was, and they weren't going to let this go easily. The thought of facing off with Verk and the Jaren Syndicate was a chilling one. Caleb had been a trader, a businessman, not a soldier. He had never faced this kind of danger before, and the more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. Zarya, on the other hand, seemed calm, perhaps too calm. She spent most of her time in the training room, working with the other warriors. Every now and then, Caleb would watch them practice their combat techniques. They were fierce, efficient, and deadly. But there was something about Zarya's presence that stood out even more. Despite the heavy burden of her past, she moved with the grace of a predator, her every movement purposeful, calculated. One evening, as Caleb was reviewing the ship's systems in the cockpit, Zarya came to find him. She stood in the doorway for a moment, her arms crossed, her eyes watching him carefully. "You're worried," she said, breaking the silence. Caleb looked up at her, startled. "What makes you say that?" She raised an eyebrow. "You've been avoiding the training rooms." "You're not sleeping well, you think I don't notice?" Caleb sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm just trying to figure things out. This whole thing is bigger than I thought. I didn't sign up for a war." Zarya stepped into the room and leaned against the wall, her eyes softening. "I didn't ask you to fight, but you are. You've already chosen your side, whether you want to admit it or not. We can't go back now." He looked out of the cockpit window, watching the stars streak by. He wasn't sure if it was the right decision, but he knew one thing for certain. There was no going back, not after everything that had happened. "I'm not a warrior," he said, his voice quiet. "I don't know how to fight like you do. I've never fought for anything other than a good deal." Zarya smiled faintly. "That's not true. You've already fought. You fought for us when you chose to save us from the slavers. You fought when you decided to trust us, even when we had nothing to offer." Caleb looked at her, surprised by the softness in her voice. "I don't trust easily." "You trust us more than you think," she said, her voice firm. "You trust in the strength of something more than just yourself. That's the mark of a true warrior." Caleb didn't know how to respond. He wasn't sure if he was ready to accept that kind of responsibility, but Zarya's words resonated with him. Maybe he wasn't meant to fight as a soldier, but perhaps there was another way he could help them. The sound of the ship's AI interrupted his thoughts, its mechanical voice filling the room. "Approaching destination, hidden world of the Kantari, coordinates locked." Caleb stood up, nodding. "Thanks, Sira. Let's make sure we're ready." Zarya gave him a nod, her eyes hardening with determination. "We've come this far. There's no turning back now." The ship descended through the atmosphere of the hidden world, the surface below them covered with dense forests and ancient ruins. Caleb had been to countless planets, but this one felt different. The air felt thicker, like it carried the weight of centuries. Zarya had told him little about the place, only that it was a sanctuary for her people before they fell. The exact location of the ruins was a mystery to everyone except the last of the Kantari, and even they had forgotten much of their history. As the Resolute touched down, the warriors disembarked first, their steps heavy as they looked around the unfamiliar landscape. The forest was alive with the sounds of strange creatures, their calls echoing through the trees. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of earth and moss filled Caleb's lungs. It was beautiful, but there was an eerie quiet to it, as if the planet itself was waiting. Zarya led the way, her movements sure and swift. Caleb followed, keeping a close eye on her. She didn't speak much as they walked, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted around, scanning the area for any sign of danger. After an hour of walking, they came to the entrance of an ancient temple, hidden deep within the forest. It was overgrown with vines and moss, but the architecture was unmistakable, the kind of design Caleb had seen in the old history books, the kind that spoke of an empire long gone. "This is it," Zarya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The place where we once sought refuge." The warriors gathered around the entrance, their expressions solemn. Zarya stepped forward, placing her hand on the stone door, her fingers brushing over ancient symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low rumble, the door began to shift, revealing a dark hallway beyond. The air inside the temple was cool, and the smell of dust and age lingered in the air. Caleb felt a sense of awe wash over him as they stepped inside, the walls lined with statues and carvings depicting the glory of the Kantari. There was an unmistakable energy here, an ancient power that seemed to pulse through the stones. They walked deeper into the temple, following Zarya as she led them toward the central chamber. As they neared the heart of the temple, the atmosphere became heavier, more oppressive. Caleb felt it too, a sense of foreboding, like something was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. Zarya stopped in front of an altar where an ornate stone pedestal stood. On top of the pedestal was a small, glowing crystal, its light flickering like a heartbeat. Caleb approached cautiously, his eyes locked on the crystal. "This is it," Zarya said quietly. "The heart of Cantor." Caleb took a step forward, his hand hovering just above the crystal. He could feel its energy, its power, but there was something unsettling about it. It felt like it was waiting for something, as if it knew they were here for it. "Be careful," Zarya warned, her voice tense. "The artifact is not just a key, it is a test. It will choose who is worthy." Caleb swallowed hard, unsure of what to do next. He had no idea what the heart of Cantor was capable of, but he knew one thing for sure. Their journey was far from over. Just as Caleb reached out to touch the crystal, the ground beneath them trembled, and the distant sound of footsteps echoed through the temple. Someone else had found them. The tension in the air was thick as Caleb pulled his hand back from the crystal, his heart racing. The footsteps grew louder, and then, suddenly, a voice rang out from the darkness. "You think you can take the heart of Cantor from us?" The voice was cold, mocking. "You are mistaken." Zaria's hand went to the weapon at her side, her eyes narrowing. "It's them," she whispered. "The Syndicate, they've found us." Caleb's pulse quickened. The Jaren Syndicate was here, and they weren't going to let the heart of Cantor go without a fight. The mission had just become much more dangerous. The sound of footsteps echoed through the temple, growing louder with each passing second. Caleb's heart raced as he stood frozen before the glowing heart of Cantor. He knew this moment had come, the moment when everything would change. The Syndicate had found them. Zaria moved like a shadow, instinctively drawing her weapon. The warriors behind her followed suit, their eyes scanning the dark corridors of the temple, waiting for the enemy to appear. Caleb felt the tension in the air like a tangible force. This was it. The Syndicate was here to take the heart, and they wouldn't leave without a fight. The voice that had called out earlier came again, this time closer, more threatening. "You've come all this way for nothing. The heart of Cantor belongs to us. Surrender it, and we'll let you live." Caleb could hear the sneer in the voice. The Syndicate was used to getting what they wanted, but there was something in Zaria's eyes now, something different. Her people had fallen once, but she wasn't going to let it happen again, not without a fight. "We don't want to fight you," Zaria said, her voice low but firm. "But we won't give up the heart." Caleb's eyes darted to the entrance of the chamber. He couldn't see anyone yet, but he could feel their presence. The Syndicate was close, too close. He had to act quickly. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way to get them out of this situation alive. Just then, the shadows in the doorway shifted, and figures emerged from the darkness. The Syndicate had arrived. There were 5 of them, their faces masked, but Caleb could tell they were dangerous. Their movements were calculated, precise. They had been trained for this. They were here to claim the heart, no matter the cost. The leader of the Syndicate stepped forward, his voice cold and commanding. "You don't know who you're dealing with. The heart will make us unstoppable. Give it to us now, or you will regret it." Zaria stepped in front of Caleb, her posture defensive. "You don't understand. The heart of Cantor isn't just an artifact. It's not a weapon. It's a key to something far greater. You can't control it." The Syndicate leader chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "We don't need to control it. We just need to use it, and we'll stop anyone who gets in our way." With a swift motion, he signaled to his men, and they all drew their weapons. Caleb's pulse quickened. The situation was spiraling out of control and fast. He didn't know how they could fight 5 trained Syndicate operatives, but he knew they couldn't back down. Not now. Without warning, Zaria lunged forward, her blade flashing through the air. The first Syndicate agent didn't even have time to react before she struck. With a swift, clean movement, she knocked him to the ground, his weapon flying out of his hand. The other 4 Syndicate agents rushed at her, but the remaining warriors, led by Zaria, moved with precision, blocking their attacks and striking with deadly force. Caleb stood at the edge of the action, his heart racing as he watched the battle unfold. He had no training, no experience, but he couldn't just stand there. He had to do something. As 2 Syndicate agents tried to flank Zaria, Caleb grabbed a fallen weapon from the ground, a blaster, cold and heavy in his hands. He aimed it at one of the attackers and fired. The shot hit its target, sending the agent stumbling back. He wasn't dead, but he was out of the fight for now. The leader of the Syndicate, seeing his men fall, took a step back. "You'll regret this," he growled. "The Syndicate doesn't take failure lightly." Zaria's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret underestimating us." Caleb looked around. The battle was fierce, and the sound of clashing metal and gunfire filled the chamber. He could feel the intensity of the fight, the adrenaline, the fear, the determination. Zaria and her warriors were holding their own, but the Syndicate leader was still out there, and they needed to end this quickly. As the last of the Syndicate agents fell, the leader raised his hand, signaling for his men to retreat. "This isn't over," he spat, his eyes burning with hatred. "We will be back. You cannot hide from us forever." Without waiting for a response, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, his remaining agents following close behind. Caleb breathed a sigh of relief, but the tension in the air was far from gone. Zaria turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Is everyone okay?" Caleb asked, his voice shaky. Zarya nodded, but her eyes were focused on the door. For now, but they will be back. The Syndicate doesn't give up easily. Caleb's mind raced. The Syndicate was more dangerous than he'd imagined. He thought about the heart of Cantor, still glowing faintly on the altar. It was clear now that it wasn't just a relic, it was the key to something much bigger, something that had the power to change the galaxy. But it was also a target. The Syndicate wanted it, and they wouldn't stop until they got it. "We need to move," Zarya said, her voice urgent. "The longer we stay here, the more danger we put ourselves in." Caleb nodded, trying to keep his mind focused. "Right, we need to get back to the ship." The warriors gathered their weapons and moved swiftly through the temple, keeping an eye out for any more threats. As they reached the exit, Caleb couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The Syndicate had come for the heart, and they had barely escaped with their lives. What would happen if they returned, stronger and better prepared? But there was no time for that now. They had to get out, and fast. Caleb's mind kept going back to Zarya's words. The heart of Cantor is a key to something far greater. What did that mean? What was the true purpose of the heart, and why did the Syndicate want it so badly? He didn't know the answers, but he knew one thing for sure. The fight was far from over. The Syndicate would come for them again, and when they did, they would have to be ready. The warriors made their way back to the ship, moving quickly through the dense forest. The air felt heavier now, as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. The sense of danger had not lifted, it had only grown stronger. As they reached the clearing where the Resolute was parked, Caleb looked up at the sky, his mind racing. The battle wasn't over. It had only just begun, and if the Syndicate came again, they would have to be prepared for whatever was coming next. Inside the ship, Zarya turned to him, her expression hardening. "We need to find out what the heart really is. The Syndicate will stop at nothing to take it from us, but we can't let them win." Caleb nodded, his mind still spinning with questions. "Where do we go from here?" Zarya's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time since they met, Caleb saw something different in her eyes. It wasn't just the warrior he had seen before. It was something deeper, hope, determination. "We fight," she said simply. "We fight and we win." The quiet hum of the Resolute filled the cockpit as Caleb sat at the controls, staring out at the stars. The battle with the Syndicate was over, for now, but the tension was still heavy in the air. They had escaped, but it wasn't over, not by a long shot. Zarya stood beside him, her posture rigid, eyes fixed on the distant stars. Caleb could feel the weight of her thoughts, the burden of everything she had carried with her. The mission wasn't just about the heart of Cantor anymore. It was about survival. It was about redemption for her people, for herself. "We can't keep running," Zarya said, her voice low but firm. "The Syndicate will keep coming for us, and every time we escape, they'll only come back stronger. We need to fight." Caleb nodded, but he wasn't so sure. He had no experience with this kind of fight. He was a trader, a businessman. His skills were in negotiation, not in war. But Zarya was right. The heart of Cantor was too important to let fall into the Syndicate's hands. It wasn't just a relic, it was something that could change the galaxy. "I don't know how we fight them," Caleb said, running a hand through his hair. "We're outnumbered, outgunned." Zarya turned to face him, her eyes unwavering. "We don't need to be stronger, we need to be smarter. The Syndicate may have more resources, but they don't have what we have. They don't have the will to fight for something greater. They only fight for power. We fight for survival." Caleb met her gaze, feeling the weight of her words. He had seen it in her. There was a fire inside her, a fire that refused to die, no matter how many times her people had fallen. And now, for the first time, Caleb felt it too. He wasn't just helping them survive. He was fighting for something bigger than himself. The ship's AI interrupted his thoughts, its voice cold and efficient. "Incoming transmission, Captain." Caleb pressed a button, bringing up the screen. The face of the Syndicate leader appeared, his eyes cold and calculating. "I warned you, human," the leader said. "You cannot hide from us. The heart of Cantor belongs to the Syndicate, and we will have it no matter what it takes." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving Caleb staring at the blank screen. He turned to Zarya, who was already moving, her hand on her weapon. "They've found us," she said, her voice calm but tense. "We need to act quickly." Caleb stood up, his heart pounding. He had never been in a situation like this before, but he couldn't let the Syndicate win, not after everything they had been through. Not after everything they had lost. "We'll take the fight to them," he said, his voice steady. "We won't run anymore. This ends now." Zarya gave him a small nod, a flicker of approval in her eyes. I knew you'd understand. The battle began before they even reached the Syndicate's stronghold. Caleb didn't know how they had tracked them so quickly, but he knew they had no time to waste. They couldn't afford to wait until the Syndicate's forces surrounded them. They had to strike first. The ship's engines roared as the Resolute cut through space, heading straight for the Syndicate's stronghold, a massive fortress built into the heart of a dead planet. The planet itself was nothing but dust and rock, but the Syndicate had turned it into a fortress, a place where they could control everything. As they neared the planet, Caleb felt his nerves tighten. This was it, the final confrontation. There was no turning back now. Zarya stood next to him, her eyes focused on the monitor. We'll need to disable their defenses before we land. We can't afford to let them open fire first. Caleb nodded, his fingers moving over the controls. He had never been a soldier, but he had learned quickly. Zarya had taught him what she could, and the rest he had figured out on his own. He was no warrior, but he was learning. Got it, he said, activating the ship's weapon systems. The ship's lasers glowed red as they powered up. Ready when you are. Zarya's voice was calm but filled with authority. We'll make a quick strike, hit their power systems, and disable their weapons. Once that's done, we land and take the fight to them. The ship shuddered as they passed through the planet's atmosphere. The ground below was a barren wasteland, scarred by years of conflict. But within that wasteland was the Syndicate's stronghold, a towering structure built into the rocky surface, its walls fortified with shields and heavy weaponry. We're almost there, Zarya said. Stay sharp, Caleb nodded, his heart racing as they neared the target. The Syndicate had no idea they were coming, and that was the advantage they needed. The ship's weapons fired in quick succession, lasers streaking across the sky as they targeted the Syndicate's outer defenses. The shields flickered under the barrage, and Caleb grinned. They were making progress. But then an alarm blared. Shields failing, the AI warned. Enemy counterattack detected. Zarya's eyes narrowed. They knew we were coming. The Syndicate had been waiting for them. Of course they had. They wouldn't let a ship like the Resolute get so close without expecting some kind of attack. But it didn't matter now. They had committed to this fight and they couldn't back down. Caleb gritted his teeth, focusing on the controls. We're not turning back. The ship shook again as the Syndicate fired back, their weapons slamming into the shields. But Caleb held steady. They had come too far to lose now. With a final blast, the ship's weapons disabled the last of the Syndicate's shields. The fortress loomed ahead, the ground shaking as they made their descent. Caleb felt the ship's thrusters fire, slowing their descent. They had made it through the first wave, but the real battle was just beginning. The landing gear of the Resolute touched down with a jolt, and the doors opened. Zarya led the way, her warriors following closely behind. Caleb's heart raced as they stepped onto the barren surface, the wind kicking up dust around them. The Syndicate's stronghold was a massive, imposing structure, its walls lined with turrets and armed guards. But Caleb wasn't afraid anymore. They had come this far. They weren't going to lose now. Zarya's voice was sharp as she barked orders to her warriors. Stay together, we fight as one. They moved swiftly, their steps sure as they advanced on the fortress. Caleb stayed close to Zarya, his eyes scanning the area. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew one thing: the Syndicate would throw everything they had at them. And they did. The first wave of Syndicate soldiers came at them, weapons drawn and ready. Zarya led the charge, her blade flashing in the light as she cut through them with ease. The warriors fought with the same precision and deadly efficiency that had made the Kantari feared across the galaxy. Caleb wasn't a soldier, but he did what he could. He fired his blaster at the approaching soldiers, his shots hitting their targets with surprising accuracy. The battle raged on, and Caleb felt the adrenaline surge through his veins. This was war. This was survival, and they were going to win. As the last of the Syndicate soldiers fell, Zarya turned to Caleb, her face set in determination. We're not done yet. The heart of Cantor is inside. We need to secure it before the Syndicate can take it. They moved quickly through the corridors of the fortress, each step bringing them closer to their goal. The air was thick with tension, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. Caleb could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him. This was it. The final confrontation. They reached the central chamber of the fortress where the heart of Cantor was kept in a secure vault. But as they approached, they heard voices, low, urgent whispers. The Syndicate leader had arrived. You're too late, he said, stepping into view. The heart is ours. Zarya stepped forward, her eyes cold. Not today. With that, the final battle began.